Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here. Glad you could be with me for another broadcast on God's answers for anxiety and depression. As always, I want to wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Now, I want to begin by saying that if you have the notification buttons on, you'll realize that I haven't did a lesson in the last 2 days. Monday I did. Today's Thursday. And Monday I did. Tuesday I didn't, and yesterday I didn't. Yesterday was a very, very rainy, some really hard rains, and I had some laryngitis as well. Tuesday just very busy, which as I've told you is going to happen from time to time. So make sure that you keep that notification button, or hit it if you haven't, so you'll know when I've uploaded these lessons. Now today, very beautiful day, but the wind is kicking up pretty good. You're probably going to hear the sound. If I turn this just a little bit, you'll get to see it, of the locks and the water coming down. So you're probably hearing in the background what sounds like a waterfall, which actually that's what it is, except it's man-made. And these are the locks that control the Mohawk River. And occasionally I'm hoping that this windscreen that I got, this odd looking guy here, is going to compensate for the occasional gusts of wind that we are getting up here in upstate New York today. So we'll see how this goes. In any case, I want to talk to you today about never giving up. Anybody who strives for success in anything is bound to be hit with obstacles. We've talked about that. But also with the temptation to be discouraged. Now, naturally, the more obstacles you have, the more frustration you have, and then the temptation grows to quit. Through discouragement, just quit. Just give up. Now, for you, dealing with anxiety and depression, that would be a very, very bad mistake to quit, to give up. I mean, there's some goals in life that after you think it through, the investment that you're putting into something, maybe it's not worth it any longer. Now, there's times for that. But there are certain areas in life, one being our relationship with Jesus Christ, and then the other, for our purposes here, your health, where giving up is not an option. It's not an exit strategy. So we have to come to the conclusion that giving up when it comes to mental health is not an option. I've accented this in different ways in the time that we've been on the air, or I've been on the air, and you can see where the wind's blowing, right? It's starting to blow the camera. The occasional gusts that come in are very, very strong. Yesterday's winds were very powerful, with the driving rain that went with it. Let me see if I can steady this camera just a little bit with my foot. So anyway, giving up is just not an option when it comes to your mental health. To do so To be hit with such discouragement in battling your symptoms, in battling your thoughts, your depression, your anxiety, and so on. To give up means you're going to concede to either many years or to a lifetime of suffering, to one degree or the other, but still many years more or a lifetime of suffering. There's a thought that I want to pass along to you, and it ties in with this theme of never giving up, and also with the theme of discouragement. Isaac Newton's laws of physics, one of which states that objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So, when you have a good head of steam in tackling your problems, you have a good head of steam in dealing with your symptoms of anxiety and depression. Of course, the obstacles are going to come, but the general principle is this: once you're really going forward and making progress, you will tend to keep going forward and making progress. But if for some reason you quit, then you become that object at rest, which will always have a tendency to stay at rest. So we could look at it this way: if through discouragement you quit and you give up, the tendency from that point onward, unless something changes, is that you're not going to make any more attempts at getting better or beating this thing or being well. So, a very simple concept, but as I've told you so many times, simple is not the same as easy. Now, I don't know, honestly, of anybody who's endeavoring to do anything who isn't hit with discouragement, at least from time to time. But those are critical moments. Decisions have to be made. Now again, let me repeat myself. If you've been pursuing some goal, which at the first seemed like a very good goal, noble goal, something you wanted, maybe even something that you felt compelled to do, there are times when the investment that you're putting into it, time, effort, energy, and so on, doesn't really equal any longer the intended outcome. In other words, in reaching your goal, something other than our relationship with Christ and our health, but particularly mental health. This is, not the same type of it's not the same type of giving up or giving over and saying, you know what, this just isn't worth it anymore. There are many, many things in life that we could, and sometimes we should, just stop doing because it's just not working out. It's not worth the investment anymore. It's sort of like, gamblers, especially those who play cards, and the popular song made famous by Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. Well, I think there's a lot of goals in life where it's just time to say, this isn't worth it anymore. This isn't, the effort going into it is just not paying off, and once I reach the goal, I'll have so much invested in it that the goal won't equal what the investment was, or the effort was. Mental health is entirely different. No matter how hard the situation is for you at the moment, cannot give up, cannot give in. You cannot become that object that is now at rest. Of course, I'm using the word rest not in the sense that is good for us, taking a rest, or now I feel like I'm really at rest. I'm talking about quitting. And once you give in to that temptation, then in a sense, not only the battle, but the war is over, and your condition, your symptoms have won, and they won't go away. Let me just say something here to be clear. Rest is good for your nervous system, right? Remember the lesson I gave you on motionless sitting? Well, that's good for the nervous system. That's an object at rest, your body. But obviously I'm not using the word rest in the same context. Quitting is more than just a rest, the way we usually use the word. You become inert. You're just not moving at all, which I think would relate more to depression than to anxiety. With anxiety, you're, in a manner of speaking, jumping all over the place, whereas with depression, the tendency is to be inert, whether it's laying in the bed with the occasional movement over to the couch, and from the couch back to the bed, and so on. That's an object that is inert. It's an object that's at rest, and it will have the tendency, or you will have the tendency, to stay at rest unless you're acted upon by another outside force. That's still part of Newton's law, physics. Oddly enough, when it comes to anxiety, there's something of the law of Newton that applies, I think. Objects in motion. Anxiety creates so much energy, like anger, creates so much energy that, if not controlled, will have a tendency to keep propelling you into more anxiety, more panic, more suffering. In any case, you cannot afford the luxury of quitting. Cannot afford that luxury, which indeed is really not a luxury. You cannot afford to quit, to give up, or to give in. Now, there are times when taking a break is a good thing to do. Sometimes the pace is too rapid. Sometimes when it comes to being symptomatic with anxiety and depression and so on, sometimes the symptoms are so many or are so acute that you have to kind of take on a defensive position, which I talked about either earlier this week or last week. Never play defense. However, boxing would be a great example. There's times when during a fight, the course of a fight, the opponent gets the advantage and you're going to be taken out or knocked out. So you have to go into a defensive mode. Sometimes you're so exhausted, it's another example, in the ring, that you have to either cling to your opponent or have to run around the ring to find some place where you can catch your breath. And if you've absorbed a very solid punch, you have to be able to gather yourself together. Now, when we apply that over to nervous symptoms, then we have to realize there's times when things are so overwhelming we have to just kind of play more of a defensive game. But ordinarily, we don't want to play defense. We always want to be on the offense. But there are times when we're forced into a defensive position, but that's temporary. So you cannot afford to give up, and you cannot afford to give in. You cannot afford to surrender, and you cannot afford to quit. Quitting, surrender, it's not an option. Not for you. Not in this area, again, to be clear. There are probably other areas of your life you're pursuing something that just, either it could be financially or otherwise, energy-wise, both, where it's just not worth the effort anymore. The goal is not that important. Mental health is obviously much, much different. It is something that must be pursued constantly. Even if for the moment you're on the defense, you're so overwhelmed by problems, and you're so overwhelmed by, well, let's say symptoms in this case, that, you know, you got to just kind of run and hide. I don't mean that's a metaphor. I don't mean that literally, hide someplace physically. I mean, here, you got to just say, I'm overwhelmed. Interestingly, God has a word for us on that. What time I am overwhelmed, I will put my trust in thee. You see, even the psalmist and all the characters of the Bible had their moments of discouragement. Many of the prophets articulated clearly to God they didn't want to do this anymore. And for the one or two people out there who may be watching and you're in ministry, you know what I mean. Well, for that matter, it applies to just about everything, whether you're in your marriage, as a spouse, in other areas of life. Sometimes you just say that, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in this fight anymore. And again, there is a time and a place to evaluate whether this is worth it any longer, or we could even say whether God wants you involved in something any longer. When it comes to mental health, there's only two options, as I gave you in lessons past. You win or you lose. That's it. There's no other option in between, not that I'm aware of. I mean, you either have good mental health or you don't. And there's nothing really in between. To give up, to quit, to concede, to surrender means you not only have lost, present tense, but you're going to continue to lose in the future. And eventually it will swallow up your life, take your life away from you. I don't mean dead. I mean that you're going to be dead. I just mean that you won't have a life. You won't be able to go here, do this, and there will always be some type of restriction on you, put onto you by your symptoms, right? So you can never quit. You can never give in. But you can, when appropriate, take a break, catch your breath. And the idea is, I'm catching my breath and taking a break so I can get back at it again and defeat this thing once and for all. And that's an interesting, or rather appealing thought. To be rid of your symptoms once and for all. Done. Well, let me just say, that's not easily accomplished, but it can be accomplished. Never quit. Never give in. Never give up. No surrender. No, raising up the white flag. There is no, comes a boat going past us here. There is no winning if you've already surrendered. I'm thinking about Robert E. Lee when he finally surrendered to General Grant at the Appomattox courthouse at the end of the American Civil War. That was the end. That was it. Lee knew that to continue this war any longer there'd be no sense in it at all. The South had lost. Now, war is different than the war going on inside your mind and inside your body. Once again, to concede to your symptoms, to your thoughts, means you have lost. But unlike, well, at least some wars, many wars, where you actually have a truce, a peace pact, your symptoms are not going to make peace with you. Your symptoms are not going to say, let's call it a draw. What your symptoms will do is just further terrorize you and torment you. So, what I want to convey to you is this. There isn't anybody on the face of the earth who's truly pursuing something worthwhile, and certainly mental health is worthwhile, who isn't faced with discouragement, setbacks. We've talked about those. And by the way, in case you're new to the broadcast, setbacks are inevitable. No matter how much progress you make, there's always some type of setback. But we can keep that setback we can minimize it, the effects of it, if we handle it correctly. So let's say you're having a setback now. You've been making progress, but you're having a setback at the moment. So you kind of, again, the boxing illustration, you kind of roll with the punch, because you're going to play a little bit of defense for a little bit in order to regain some strength and get right back out on the offense and go back out these symptoms, back at your condition once again. Those are the rules of winning. Never give up. Never concede. Never surrender. And you should know, I certainly know, quitting is a whole lot easier than what I've shared with you several times, than making another improvisation, adapting to another plan, and then using that to overcome. Quitting is the path of least resistance. Unfortunately, unlike quitting a hobby, let's say, where time, energy, money, everything is just not worth the hobby anymore. It's too expensive, too costly, too much energy, too much time. With mental health, it's not the same thing. So, you're going through some discouragement at the moment for one reason or the other, or several reasons all at once. Take your breath, regather yourself, slow the pace down so that you can get back at it again. I'm going to give you a little bit of a small part of a long poem, but it has application, and I'm going to finish with this quotation. It goes this way. Once in Persia reigned a king, who upon his signet ring raised a maxim, true and wise. And if it held before the eyes, it gave him counsel at a glance. Solemn words, and these are they. Even this shall pass away. Your discouragement will pass. Don't quit. Don't surrender. Don't give up. Don't give in. Let me pray for you today. Father, I pray once again for my friends, some of whom are experiencing discouragement, some of whom are experiencing setbacks, obstacles, and the frustration is very deep. Once again, give my friends your peace, your strength, your deliverance. And I pray all of that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so God willing, let me just say the last 2 days the creek did rise, so I wasn't able to get these broadcasts up. Today, almost entertained not doing this. I'm hoping that this microphone filter, the windscreen, has helped out with this very windy day. In either case, God willing, and the creek don't rise again, I'll be with you here tomorrow on another broadcast of God's answers for anxiety and depression. So don't forget, if you're interested in being with me, joining our class, subscribe to the channel. And make sure to hit the notification button for all the obvious reasons. God bless, and Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow.